Okay, looks like we are up and running. Let me go close the door. Would you like a water bottle? No. What do you think? Change mine a minute. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody at home. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here. Today is the third Thursday of the month, so today we are going to be talking about advanced cameras. So, when we talk about advanced cameras or advanced photography, what are we really trying to get into? The first class of the month we did intro, which was where the buttons exist on the camera, how to understand where to find all of that, and then just kind of a brief overview of what those buttons do. We then ended on lenses and the topic of what glass you might need. Intermediate cameras, we get away from the basic information. We're trying to learn how to stop using automatic as a setting. We want to learn about aperture, shutter, ISO, and how they all come together, but how they can all be used separately within the photography experience. Now, coming into the third week of the month, we are going to be looking at advanced photography. We're really going to be trying to focus on getting content and creation off of the ground. So what we really want to get after is how to take a good photo, what rules get employed during that. Then we want to talk about how to edit our photos, because 80% of the battle comes from what comes out of the camera, but 20% is that finishing touch, that color, that contrast, that exposure, our ability to make the photo brighter or darker, more moody or more exciting or happy. That's the 20% that comes from the editing aspect of it. To end the class up to, we're going to then talk about advanced accessories you can get into if you find your photography or videography game needs more. And then that's where we'll basically end everything. So without further ado, let's jump into advanced photography. So let's start with tips for taking great photos. We went through and talked about how to take photos via the settings. But these are things that I, as a student, learned for photography. As I've gotten older, there is some things I have learned and picked up now. But the one thing I will say with photography as a whole, rules are meant to be broken. So the rules and the things I tell you here, they're tips. They're meant to just be ideas or thoughts that you can jump off of in order to get good photos. However, at any point in time, if you think that there's a better way to do this, or you want to try to be unconventional, that's the exciting part of photography and where you can learn. Just like the great Picasso, he learned by doing traditional works, painting people perfectly with proportions and everything being correct. Then later in life got into abstract expressionism and created that movement because he had the foundation, the technical experience in order to do that. And that's what we want to get at with photography. We want the technical experience to then get into more of a creative side and an explorative side. So my first section is going to be about portraits, then we'll get more into landscape. Portraits and landscape are the two most iconic types of photography. From there you might be asking, well, what about, nature, or what about cityscapes, or what about macro, anything. The rules I explained here follow and can continue into the other types of photography that you might be interested in taking in. The whole point is though looking at things that are more landscape, wide angle, to portrait, which is tighter. In the portrait mindset, we want to fill the frame. On the left side, the photo we see there's a lot of negative space and gutter space, things that don't necessarily need to be inside the photo. The molding on the wall, the way that the wall is shaped and has edges and curves, the lighting that we're seeing along the wall. Those are aspects that, hi there, welcome in. Those are aspects on the photo that don't necessarily need to be there. If we can simply crop in on our image and fill the frame, we can ignore or get rid of negative space that might help alter or change our photo in a positive way. Hi there, welcome in. One aspect of this that we can see the positive change on is the fact that our main attention is being brought to our subject matter here in the photo. By eliminating the excess gutter space and that area that's not needed, that doesn't give us information towards a better photo, we're able to pull in the information we need to give a better, more accurate portrait. So fill the frame when you can. This would be a great opportunity for things like headshots, or if you're taking pictures of food or items for something, that could be a great option too. Getting rid of things that don't need to be there and just focusing in on the subject or the person or the item that you're taking photos of.
Wait, I'm sorry. Do you right or left is ideal one?
So the right side. So right now what we're talking about in the advanced class is taking photos, editing photos, and then advanced accessories is today.
Gotcha.
So today, right now, filling the frame would be where I'm trying to get at, which is basically taking things that aren't necessarily needed, like the extra excess wall, cropping in on it to give ourselves a better image overall towards a portrait or an item. If we have things that don't help the photo, we can crop them out and get rid of them in order just to focus on the main subject.
Thank you.
Eyes in the top third. We're going to talk about the rule of thirds in a little bit, but if we look at photography as a whole, typically on your menu settings or within your camera's display, you can divide the photo into 9 squares, or a top section, a middle, and a bottom, or a right, center, and left section. If we as a photographer can naturally keep our subject's eyes in the top third, we're creating nicer symmetry within the photo, and we're creating good eye directional movement. Humans are creatures of habit. We like to start from the top and go to the bottom. That's how we're taught to read. That's how we're taught to do a lot of different things in the world. And with that being said, art and photography usually are in very similar boats. There's lots of different gotchas in this. It could be a shiny part, and that's the only shiny aspect in a dark photo. That could be, that a photo itself is very, kind of grotesque or weird in nature, but there's one part that's eye-catching. There are ways to bend these rules. But when it comes to humans or portraits, our subject matter, as long as those eyes are in the top third of the image, it creates a more symmetrical and a more easily plotted photo to look at as a human. Now, if we can't get the eyes in there, the eyebrows will suffice too. So eyes or eyebrows in that top third section of our photo will naturally create a more stimulating image. And on top of that too, it's easier to read going down, especially in this case because it's a portrait face. Focusing in on the eyes is always going to be a great technique and a great thing to do in portrait photography. Most modern cameras that I'd say have been made in the last, let's say, 5 to 6 years are using eye tracking technology. So they have a tracker that automatically will pop up on someone's eye. This came about in the, let's say, early 2000s, and it's now become part of the norm for cameras in the last 6 years because of red eye. Back in the day, taking a photo would mean that your portraits could have a red eye on the image, and it would just look kind of scary or spooky. From there, then, the cameras got really good at detecting eyes and being able to manipulate flashes or light so that way you don't get this red or washed out eye. Nowadays, the tracking's so advanced that it'll stop and actually track the eye itself, keeping the rest of the face and body or whatever it is in full focus. So there's a lot of bonus points to it, but if you have a camera that is within the last 6 or 7 years, I'll say 6 years to be on the safe side, you should have eye tracking technology built into the camera. Now when it comes to kids, animals, anything that's on a smaller scale that we can't necessarily take photos of from a viewing point, or we take photos shooting down on the subject matter, I might recommend getting on their level to make it more professional. If we look at this image, this is not a bad image, this is a very candid image. This is something that your parents might have taken of you as a child at a birthday party, or maybe something you've taken of your own children at a party of some sort. Or maybe, even if we look at like dogs, for example, if there's a bunch of dogs playing, they're probably not on your eye level, so you're taking a photo pointed down at them. If you can dip the camera, and work on getting on their level, mixed with all the skills that we talked about last week in the intermediate class, you should be able to get something closer to this, which might not be as fun or silly as the first photo, but has more of a professional quality. If you are trying to build a portfolio and show that you can take pictures of landscape, architecture, adults, children, It's a huge market to get family photos or to get good pictures of kids within their infancy. Parents love that stuff, and people enjoy that stuff too, to see how people progress and grow as they get older. A photo like this just shows off a good amount of photography skills and that basis of understanding. You've got the background blurred out. Some of the birthday cake is in the focus with what I would assume is the birthday boy. Eyebrows, in this case, at least that one's probably within the top third. The little girl in the background, her eyes are definitely within the top third of that image. We've got him in full focus with a nice background blur. It's not overly lit, but it's light enough that you can make out all the details. His shirt is brightly colored. His teeth are clean. His whole overall look is organized and kept. Same thing with then the cake as well, too, even within the chaos of all the different frostings and what we've got going on there. So overall, a nicer image, more pleasant, more professional, versus something like this. And again, this is not a bad image, but if we're trying to become more of a professional photographer and less of that candid experience, then just simply ducking down or ducking our camera straight down could help us take an image closer to this. That being said, for the last part of the portrait talk, rule of thirds. I mentioned it earlier. When we divide our 9 boxes into 3 different sections, top, middle, bottom, or right, center, left, we're left with these 4 intersecting points. The rule of thirds, or the way that it's taught, is that by hitting on one of those corners, you're naturally creating something that might show little to no symmetry, but it'll be stimulating to the human eye to look at because of the placement of the subject matter or the main piece of information that we're looking at. It's not to say putting an image in the dead center isn't also stimulating, but scientists and people who study humans and eyes and movement and tracking and interest have noticed that these 4 common spots are where you want to put an object. Some examples I have of that: my surfer. There's a few other lines, or a few other pieces of info I'll throw into this to help also as we get into landscape photography and what we should be taking photos of in a second there. First and foremost, we have our main surfer who's on that top rule of thirds very easily. The sun is casting a really intense glow and shadow, which then puts his shadow on the opposite side of the rule of thirds. From there then, we don't have a symmetrical image. However, this is stimulating all on its own because of placement and then also subject matter too. Our water touches the sky at what we call the horizon point. The horizon point is where land and water or sky meet to then basically give us a perspective view. Anything that is below my horizon line, I should be able to see the top of. And anything that's above my horizon line, I'm slightly looking up at. That's the way that you can look at the horizon line. In this case, though, the water sits perfectly on the horizon line. So not only is this symmetrical, going this direction, going horizontal, vertical, it's also horizontally symmetrical as well, too. The color from the sky automatically offers a little bit more drama, and it has more color to it. You've also got people walking in the background to show this isn't that staged or that this isn't a run-of-the-mill picture, that this took planning and thought. So there's a lot of just really nice things going on in this image to make it stimulating. In that same boat, we'll keep the beach theme. In this case, we have this little girl who now we've zoomed in more, so now instead of a shadow coming to then give us that effect, we've got her ankle and her shoulder, which are perfectly situated on the rule of thirds. The water is also very nicely on the horizon line. And between both the black and white color, the hair blowing, and the ominous sky, it's a very dramatic photo. You've got sunlight or light peeking through within the clouds, and that's where we're getting some washed out notes in this photo. But you have a breeze that's coming in, unless they put hairspray in your hair and froze it, that's then helping pushing that back. So you have movement, you've got drama, you've got really good placement within the image as far as symmetry is concerned. And overall, this is a type of photo that could tell a story, or that could be used to tell a story, given how dramatic it really feels.
Is there a reason why they chose black and white?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I personally only shoot in black and white. I'm a big fan of midtones. It's a huge aspect of my photography and my practice for what I do. Some people like shooting in it because it reminds them of something. Some people enjoy shooting in full color because they have more range and control. I personally think that well-executed black and white photos are some of the greatest pictures out there because of how hard it is to deal with midtones in a color. Midtones, because they can go both to the left or to the right, and we'll talk about histograms in a minute, that really kind of explains the black and white photography. If you can make bright and purposeful midtones, then I think overall a black and white photo can really blow a color photo out of the water. But again, it's all dependent. It's an artist pick too. As a photographer, I think that depending on what you're trying to accomplish, black and white either is going to make sense or won't make any sense. Okay. Now moving on, we've got mom and dad, brother and sister in one photo, or what I would assume to be. Both mom and dad and brother and sister are hitting the rule of thirds. One is a little bit further inwards than the other. However, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to have. In this case, though, we've got the brother and the sister up more forward. They're counterbalancing the height of the parents. The parents are obviously still going to be taller, but with this kind of deception or depth, this is where we're getting this kind of look. But everyone's hitting the rule of thirds really well. Yeah. You're okay. And then last, I got Jim in there. I put this one in here because I think it's nice with the first rule that I talk about, filling the frame. In this case, first and foremost, Jim's eyebrows are above the rule of third, above that top line. And on top of that, he's hitting the rule of thirds really nicely. With a show like The Office, if you're familiar with it, the reason that they usually show it like this and they don't crop in is because they want to give you context to where they're actually performing this interview or this little the side kind of comment that they're making in the show, right? If you've watched, you probably could guess that this is the conference room because of that ugly tree and the way that the shades are put down. But in this case, it's a great way of showing people kind of something that they've seen before without calling it out in a certain type of way, right? If they were to crop this out from here to that right there at his shoulder, you might see that in the background, but you still might not have context to where this was filmed. So again, follow the rules, but as I said in the very beginning, all rules are meant to be broken in photography because this is how we discover and we learn new things and we find how our photo style fits within the traditional rule set that you'll learn as you go about your photography journey. Now getting more into landscapes. Landscapes are heavily, and I should say landscape or cityscape. I get a lot of people that come in for more landscape photography, so this is where I kind of mainly made this about landscape. However, these two things go hand in hand. Landscape and architecture, buildings are built on landscape. So it's a weird notion, but they both are in the same category. The most important part about nature, buildings, architecture, mountains, or monoliths is horizon line and symmetry. Those two things, as long as you execute those nicely and properly as you're going through, will offer a more stimulating photo that has nothing to do with the rule of thirds or has nothing to do with keeping certain things within areas. Horizon line, like I said earlier, is pretty simple. It's where the sky and land meet. So in this case, our horizon line is going to be right where the water meets the mountains. The mountains, even though they are an object, they are something to look at, they're technically part of the skyline. And when we're looking at those, we see the face of the mountain. We're not seeing the bottom of the mountain. We're not seeing the top of the mountain. It's because our horizon line is right there. So knowing that, as we look through these photos, you can kind of see right away the first thing I notice on almost everything is that horizon line. The horizon line will tell me a story that then I can use to manipulate, whether that's like my surfer, where the sun comes through and it hits really nicely. In this case, there's not a single ripple in the water, and that horizon line being where it's at has a beautiful play with the water that's below. You get this awesome reflection of the mountains that come there, but we know that this just isn't the same image flipped over because we have a snowbank that goes across, whether that's ice on the water or grass that meets up with the actual water. And then on top of that too, we have this little snow cutout at the very bottom to show that wherever this person's shooting, they're probably set up on a tripod, low and squat to the ground, so that way you get this really nice low perception and a big sky as well too. Balance and symmetry though also play a part. So not only was the horizon line important in those images, but if you look at them, you can see the symmetry within just the top and the bottom view. Even with things like the sky being large and the ground being small, you see the relationship between the two.
I was going to ask, is that why they have the snow captured in here, to sort of like reflection of the clouds, or sort of a...
It could be. I mean, also sometimes it's just in a lot of cases too, it's happy accidents. You know, I mean, it's one thing when you listen to a photographer talk and explain their thought process behind doing this. For me, for example, I didn't take this photo. This was one that I found that I think perfectly went with symmetry, balance, and kind of knowing where things are. However, you could say that in a way, a photographer wanted to make sure that the snow would be on the bottom to help balance out the clouds that were up there. On the same time too, though, they could have moved their camera slightly up, got more of the water embankment, and let the clouds do the talking, and you would have been able to tell. So it could have been a happy accident, it could have been placement, it could have been also something that they wanted to include for the cloud reason. Okay. But that symmetry between where the mountains and that goes, there's that balance between them. And they're not hiding it, they're not trying to show it off necessarily, they're just naturally keeping it where it's at. Same thing in the other photo, but yet there's some ripple to the water, so it adds a little bit extra movement or pizzazz, if you will, to the actual photo itself, because you have an obvious ripple of water, but it still shows that reflection pretty symmetrically. And so balance and symmetry are huge. Now obviously there's always going to be multiple factors in a photo, and I think that's where the lightning plays a really cool key part of this photo. The lightning is chaotic, it doesn't show balance, it doesn't show symmetry, but it shows excitement, movement. On top of that too, you've got a beautiful horizon line, followed by this really nice color of purple that's running through it. I assume those are lavender fields of some sort. You've got the channels where people might walk down to, and perfectly in the center of this photo, of the chaos and everything else, you've got all of these roads basically leading to that middle tree right there. So that's a really good way of, even though you have all of these extra aspects and movements going, you've got really nice balance and symmetry on the bottom half of the photo, and the top half kind of adds that chaos or that excitement level. Same thing with something here. Now we've got a few different things going on, but I really like this image when I was looking through. The trees, so first and foremost, horizon line cuts right down the middle of the photo. You can definitely tell that the horizon line extends a little bit further on this one side because there's this embankment or this area of land that protrudes outwards a little more. But naturally, the water adds so much balance and symmetry to this. It's imperfect. If I were to flip this, the only extra would be that little bit of grass that's in the front, similar to the snow from the other photo. But you've got mountains on one side, mountains on the other, a center section of trees on both sides, and they're positioned in such a way too that not only are they showing symmetry this way, but like I said, if we were to flip this vertical, you'd then see the symmetry going up and down as well too. Naturally, it's more stimulating, it's more creative, it adds a flair to your photo that might not be seen on others, and to get a photo with no ripple on the water like this, that is a really amazing and tough feat. And this one's crude, but I think this one really does show it off as well too. Your horizon line is where this road basically meets. Honestly though, the horizon line might even extend further if it wasn't so kind of pixelated. But I chose this image because I really like this yellow line cutting through, giving really good, perfect symmetry. If these two signs weren't here, you could really sit there and think that this photo was inverse on itself from the line. But I think that keeping those there, keeping these dots, it really does show off a nice part of the photo that, again, while there's symmetry, there's also parts that are uneven or show chaos or don't show necessarily cutesy or pretty imaging or landscapes. This is a desert. It's definitely a desert. The roads are winding. You can see heat that's radiating from this section, and that's why you're getting that glass type look. It just doesn't look the best, but at the same time, it's very interesting. This is another one that I like to talk about within this, sun. We're going to talk about lighting as we keep moving through this class, but lighting is one of the most important aspects to photo taking. If you keep the sun at your back, you're going to naturally get worse and worse photos. The sun is your friend. It's easier to make a really light photo dark than it is to make a dark photo light. So the bad image here, we have the sun on the back of this gentleman. The gentleman has this hat pulled down a little bit, the fish in front of his face. And with that being said, we're not getting good glare, we're not getting good light on his back, or on his front, only on the back. By opening himself up a little bit more to the camera, kicking his hat back a little bit, and our photographer changing the exposure on the physical photo, we're bringing in a lot more light without washing out his skin tone and colors and everything else that he has going on. When looking at this image, it's not an amazing image, but if you're taking a photo for your friend after a trip you just did, I'm sure that they would rather have a photo that looks like this than looks like the top.
So you change the ISO setting?
You can change exposure. Yeah, I would say exposure compensation is probably easier depending on what you're shooting at, because you might have your ISO adjusted to 800, especially with this where there's no shade, no nothing, you're in the middle of the water. I don't think that ISO would probably do it for you. I think just that exposure compensation going in the right direction, make it a little bit more brighter without losing the details.
Is it erase a black pipe and that hole?
The fishing pole? No, it's just near the.
There's the fishing pole, and then there's it right there in the corner. You can see it. That's probably something for the engine of the boat.
So the second picture they erased it or?
No, they just, you can still see it right there. Yeah, they just cropped it a little bit.
Oh.
He's sitting a little bit
Yeah, he's a little
differently from
different, yeah.
before.
Oh, okay.
Now let's get more into the photo editing aspect. So again, briefly going through, learning how to take simple but good photos, taking the very basic bare bones. If you were to go out and buy a camera book, this is kind of the things that they would tell you about, and then from there it would be expanding your knowledge to figure out what you like. Let's talk about the difference between a RAW and a JPEG, and then what the heck is a process RAW. So a RAW file, if we look at just the image without me getting too technical, you can see it's washed out, it's fuzzy, it's not as clear, it looks flat. Our JPEG image though looks better, but there's still aspects that look a little bit washed out, especially where that elbow meets the background in my opinion. But if we then look at the process RAW, it's almost like we're getting the best out of the JPEG, but it still says the term RAW. The color in his hair shows more variation. The sunglasses have a shine and really do show in some front. The skin tone is what really grabs me. Things feel more rounded. They don't feel as flat as they did in the JPEG and the RAW. The wrinkles in his shirt are more noticeable. The guitar strap, the guitar has more color, more burgundy to it. Overall, it looks just like a cleaner, more professional image. So what exactly is JPEG and RAW? A JPEG photo is a compressed file, and is usually a smaller file size, something like 2 to 6 megabytes. That being said, it has a lower color bit, 8-bit. You might be asking what that does, what that means. If you were to take a JPEG and put it into a photo editing app, it's not going to really give you too much to play with, because the photo itself is a compressed file. It doesn't have much for you to play with and change and move as far as color, exposure, saturation, as far as those are concerned. And that's what I'll talk about in a second when we get more into the photo editing aspect, on what you would be able to change on a RAW. With a JPEG though, it can be edited on any editor. That's a really goofy one, but there are specific editors out there, or editing programs, that cut and do RAW photos. So if you're gonna go and you're gonna start shooting in RAW, and you you don't want to pay for editing software or a system, you're most likely going to have to convert the image back into a JPEG in order to play and edit with it on the computer. But by using a JPEG, it can be transferred much faster. Because how small the size is, compressed the file is, easy it is, it's very simple for you to take that information and just text it out, email it, and send it very quickly and fast. But if you're someone like myself or you're considering it, the whole aspect of RAW is to edit the photo. A RAW file is meant to be edited and processed, and that's why a processed RAW and a standard RAW look so different from each other. It's an uncompressed file, which means it's a larger file size. Smallest is 12 to 16 megabytes. I shoot with a 61 megapixel camera. Each time I take a photo, it's about 120, 140 megabytes just for a JPEG. So depending on your camera size, at minimum 12 to 16 for a RAW, for a JPEG at minimum 2 to 6. But because we now have an uncompressed file with a larger file size, we have a much higher color bit rating, 12-bit to 16-bit, which means that now we have more things that we can edit, play with, and when we take our sliding tools and move through on like an Adobe Photoshop, we should see drastic changes in the color, the exposure, the compensation, because we have more information to play with than we did on the JPEGs.
Now, we bought a special memory card for RAW. Is that?
That works too, yeah. I mean, that part's fine. It's the editing, though, that you need to worry more about. Things like Adobe have RAW file format editing. Things like Affinity Photo. There's also Color Resolve. There's a few other systems. I've been using Adobe and Affinity for so long, but there's a few that are out there that are fantastic too.
Like GIMP? Does GIMP does RAW? Or?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I mean, what they told us is that RAW, because it's larger, requires a faster card.
100%. And that's where that's great for. So depending on the camera that you're shooting, RAW, because it has so much information, it wants to go into the camera as quick as possible. If you have a slow card, it's going to kind of bog down your camera as it loads and figures stuff out. But if you have something that's a faster read and write speed, I'd say at least 90 or plus on the read and write, then you should have no issues. A big thing to remember is that, again, RAW can be edited on some softwares, but most likely will have to be converted into another file in order for that to work. So keep that in mind as you're going through and doing this. For a lot of people, JPEG is just fine. If you're not somebody who's interested in editing or you have very little interest, I recommend staying on JPEG. It'll still be a better image than the RAW, and you'll have more information you can stack onto the memory card. If you're contemplating editing it, a lot of the times these newer cameras can actually do it where you can take both a RAW and a JPEG at the same time. So when you go to shoot your photo, it'll take 2 pictures instead of just one, giving you the option. And when you go into your computer later and you want to check all this stuff out, you'll be able to tell right away that the ones that are JPEG are .jpg and the ones that are RAW are .raw. So keep that in mind as you're going. What I'm going to show now is editing at its finest, or editing at its very basics is what I should put this as. When I started learning photography, and even to this day, this is how I start editing all my photos and I go through it. The one thing I will tell everybody now is that after I change most of the things I change on this, I do go back and I constantly keep tweaking and readjusting and removing things, doing whatever I need to ensure that my image looks clean at the very end of it. So just because you go from step 1 to 7 on this doesn't mean you're done. All it means is that you got through the basics of it, and now you have to tweak and kind of figure out what else you want to do. First and foremost, why edit at all? Why does it matter? Who cares? Just let the camera be what comes out naturally and get over it. Like I said earlier, 80% of the photo taking is photo taking. 20% of a photo is editing. That's the way that you should be looking at it. With any of these images, why did we edit? It wasn't to change the integrity of the photo. It wasn't to manipulate it to make it look like it never came out of a camera. It's to enhance and make our photos even better. When we look at the picture of the probably father and daughter, or the uncle and niece, whatever it might be, We can see that on the photo on the right, which is the one that's been edited, the purple looks brighter. That dark shadow that's intense on the chest gets a little bit lighter so that she stands out now. The blue of her bow, the dress stands out. In general, too, he's a little bit lighter on the left or on the right side of his head and the left side if we're staring at it. So we just have more color that's popping and more interest in the image. On the right-hand side, our landscape image, we've got one side that's dark, one side that's lighter. With the newborn babies, the areas that are hard, like the shadows, where the arm fat is, or the wrinkles on the forehead, we didn't sit there with a tool and edit those away. We just made the photo a little bit lighter, and that brought out that smooth baby skin. Same thing with C. All we did was go through and change and make the colors pop a little bit more and make things stand out. We could see that the blue of her sweater gets brighter as it goes. The highlights start to get brighter and better. The face doesn't look so sunken in. It has more pop and color to it. Simple editing techniques and things that don't require you to use AI or remove something on the image. Just enough where you can make the color, the contrast, the saturation, the exposure, make those things pop. So these are some of the editing softwares. I'm very familiar with Photoshop and Lightroom. Those two are probably the most popular out there if you were to look. Capture One Pro and Corel Paint Shop Pro are fantastic. Affinity Photo is what I personally use, and I feel bad for I'm gatekeeping it. I can put it up here. One of these days I'll change that. But all of these are great because they're raw editors. So you can edit a file that's raw. With Photoshop and Lightroom, you pay monthly fees for the Adobe suites. For Corel Paint Shop and Corel Paint or Capture One Pro, the last time I checked, about a year ago, you buy it outright. You pay like $300, and then you get the whole thing.
Which one works best with Sony?
They all work really well. I mean, it just kind of comes down to preference. I had a customer ask me about that, and like I said, I like Affinity. I use it for my Sony, my Leica, and my Nikon. But that's also because it was, I think, $70 for life. I don't pay any subscriptions, and then for another $60 or $70, I was able to buy the app as well for my iPad.
I like the $60, $70.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Again, everyone's a little bit different on what they choose to use. Corel and Capture One have a lot that you can get out of those, and people make packs too that you can then insert in there, and it's like a preset that you can use. There's some really cool things that you can do out there.
Do they require updates if you purchase them?
That I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I know like mine, I have updates that come through for my Affinity that I use. I'm sure that these will require updates and then they'll patch
You
them.
have to pay for the updates.
Well, Adobe actually pay out of the license, that's a subscription fee.
Yeah, Adobe, you pay that monthly fee on that, and then they constantly update it. I don't think that you'd be paying for the updates unless a severe jump happened. Last time I know that happened with mine, it was basically, I got my first one in 2012 for Affinity, and I don't think that they had any changing within the user agreement or the licensing until about 2023. So then, 10 years of me using that same software, but then it had to be paid. So what I first start with is cleaning and cropping my image. I start by straightening the alignment of the photo. After that, I go through and make sure that I don't have any excess negative or dead space. I also do what's called spot cleaning. You should see a button on your editor that'll call this out. Basically, you'll see a logo like this, usually is a square, a bunch of hash marks going through it, and that's your ability to rotate the angle of the photo in order to make sure you get the correct kind of centering and line movement that you want. From there then, I usually crop it and I get rid of dead space that's on the image. And now this is a great time if you've got debris, let's say you have watermarks on your lens when you were shooting or some sand that got on the front there, you can do what's called spot cleaning. And spot cleaning basically has you select an area of the screen that's perfect, that's clean, and then go through and find the bad parts. The system and the software itself then can recognize the dark patches or the splotchy areas, and it can basically blend it in so it matches the same color. Again, great if you were taking photos on the beach, or like in this case, you're kayaking or going through and you've got some gunk on your lens, you didn't clean it off, you didn't notice it before. Now is where you can change it and update that. Next step is white balance. Now I talked a little bit about white balance last week during our class, but white balance, again, the color white can be perceived in hues and all different sorts of stuff based on the Kelvin scale. Light can be warm or light can be cold. That's why Christmas lights are always wild to me, because you'll see some Christmas lights that are bright baby blue, but they're white, and then you'll see other ones that almost look orange or yellowy, and those are still white, but it's different scales. White balance does not refer to the exposure of your image. Rather, it refers to color of your overall composition. You're going to have less to play with when shooting in JPEG versus RAW. Some editors will have presets that you can control and change. Others will have what's called temperature and tint, or some will have both. So, on some of your editors, you might see it where it says, oh, do you want to change your white balance to tungsten, fluorescent, flash, cloudy, shade, daylight, etc. Others will have what's called CMYK. It's a 4-set color theory. So RGB, red, green, blue, CMYK of cyan, magenta, yellow, and K always confuses me, but it is something with orange. Anyway, you'll be able to drag this to figure that out. So basically, temperature is blue or red. That's what we were talking about last week with everything. And tint is green and purple. How that makes sense in the color science world, I don't know. But to say it even more, RGB color printing means that it prints from 3 colors, red, green, and blue, and it gives you the full spectrum of color. Same with CMYK. CMYK prints from those 4 colors. Mixing all those 4 together gives you every style, every color known to man. So, depending on which system you're on, you might have the ability to go through and just do the presets on there. It might also be called input LUTs. Every editor, every software is a little bit different, but you might also just be able to change and make a basic correction by going through temperature and tint. Next 2 things that go hand in hand, and you can choose which way you want to do this. I don't have a preference on it. Exposure and contrast. Exposure and contrast are very similar. That's why I kind of bracket them onto this. Exposure plays on brightness and darkness of the whole photo. Beware of making a photo too bright because you can get a muted or muddled look to your photo. And if we look, on the right-hand corner of the image, we can see an under, a normal, and an overexposed image. So you can kind of get an idea of what I mean by that. The normal image that comes out, everything is showing color, shows its correct color, and gives separation between all the objects. Dark, you start to lose all that, you lose that brightness, and it becomes more muddled. And then overexposed brightens everything to all heck. And you start to lose the sky where it meets the buildings, you start to lose the roof and some of the plants and just that extra color that was there. Contrast does something similar, but it takes the darkest and the lightest tones of your whole image and plays with those. So high contrast makes the image stark, very dark with light, very, very light sections. And low contrast will make things look flat and washed out. The goal is always to aim for something in the middle. And for that I have the image on the very far left. You can see that by playing with just the contrast, we're not affecting the image's quality of dark and light. We're taking those extra areas of darkness and extra areas of lightness and either making them brighter, or muting them a little bit, or bringing them darker and making them more bold. And if we do this properly, the image that I have in the dead center is an example of you using both exposure and contrast to take your photo. Taking the picture just as is because it looks right, then playing with the exposure and the contrast to get the colors of the bricks to show really nicely. Lighten those up to show more of the sky, but then as we get down into the rocks that have met the water, you can see in the bottom half of the rocks they're wet, they're dark, they're muddy. The top of the rocks have like a nice matte finish, no shine. It's things like that that as you go through and you adjust, that's what you pay attention for. You don't want something to be too one way or the other, because it can then cause your photo just to look not correct, or at least not look pleasing to the eye, which is the way I should say it. Something that can help you while you're doing exposure and contrast is a histogram. Now, I personally hate histograms, and I'll tell you why in just a second. I got an image to show it. But what is a histogram? This image in the center is a perfect example of a histogram. The two big factors of an image are shadows and highlights. When we were talking about black and white photography a second ago, this to me really plays hand in hand with that. Because back before color photography was a thing and before we could do the thing, we had three colors. You had black, white, and gray. Your white, true to white color is your highlight area on a photo. Your truest, darkest black area is the shadow area. And anything that lied in between that wasn't at this rating or the highest rating lands in the middle at midtones. So when reading a histogram, it's a great way to see how light is distributed throughout your image, and it shows you a living example of that as it's measured by its luminosity. When you look at the classic painters like Leonardo, Michelangelo painted. When you look at people like Donatello, or when you look at Caravaggio, or any of the famous artists of that time period where mastering the class was perfect, one of the things that I thought was so interesting when I studied them in college was the fact that none of them used black all that often. It was mainly used in like the background or in the very small corners. They would use offsets of blue in order to achieve shadow or to darken something. Because truly, when you look at certain colors, you don't see black all that often, but the eye perceives dark areas, especially when you get into art, as black or as really dark areas, rather than it just being a certain color that doesn't have exposure or contrast involved in it. And so something like this for photography really shows that off in a beautiful way. But again, is this something you need? That's up to you. And the reason I say that, before I show the one on the right, if we look at the image on the left, we can see how effective this could be to help us, right? Properly exposed shows it nice in shadows, lights, midtones are off the charts. We go to overexposed, we're only in the highlights. We've got nothing in shadows and a very, very small amount of midtones. And vice versa, underexposed, nothing in highlights. And we've washed it all out in our midtones and shadows, and you can see the difference between them. Where I think histograms are great, I also think they're terrible, because if we look at the image on the right, we can see computers that are measuring the histograms on these finished photos. All four of these photos look really nice. However, their histogram, terrible. Compared to what this is, compared to the other slide that I showed, they're not necessarily even. They're a little off the charts in all sorts of different directions. They've got intense color in areas they probably shouldn't, but does that mean they're a bad photo? That's the key with the histogram. It's a tool, it's something to play with, it's something to keep in mind as you're editing and doing things on the computer, and it's a great tool to process and understand that. On most cameras too, you can actually turn it on where the histogram will show in the corner of your screen or viewfinder as you're taking pictures. So if that's something that intrigues you too, you can always turn that setting on. Me personally, especially after seeing that image on the right, I don't necessarily think that a histogram is all that needed. I think it's a cool tool, but I think it's just really that. So now we've talked about our shadows, our lights, our highlights, our midtones. That aspect is only one part of photography though. Color is obviously the next. Why does an artist choose to do black and white versus color? I think it's more aesthetic than anything. However though, color typically can be more lighthearted, it can be more friendly, more welcoming, whereas that stark black and white has more of a, I don't want to say offsetting tone, but it's stark in nature. It's dark, it's moody, it's dramatic. It might not necessarily be what we want. So if we're taking a color photo, we should really think about vibrancy and saturation. Again, much like exposure and contrast, these two go hand in hand. Vibrancy is going to increase or decrease the color intensity in the brightest colors. So now it's not even looking at things like highlights and shadows and midtones. It's looking at the spectrum of colors and raising it or lowering it based on what you want. And that's a perfect example of the one on the right here of our dog. With 100 minus, or with the original, you got the pink tongue. We can see the brown, some yellow in the fur. The eyes have this beautiful hazel color to them. In the minus 100 vibrancy, we lose that color. The dog's fur is still highly detailed. The eyes still have soul, tongue, everything's the same, but you can see how that color was stripped away. It was almost like the photo was left in the sun, and the sun slowly pulled its color away. On the flip side of that, though, we go plus 100 vibrancy. Well, now we're getting, instead of the yellow on the fur, it's turning more green. It feels more crusty. The eyes still have a lot of color to them. However, the tongue is so pink now in this one that it almost distracts from the photo. Much like we talked about in our first class, where with lenses, you bring in both the background and the foreground when you're shooting. Same thing goes for when we edit these things. If you look at the background of the minus 100 vibrancy, everything's dark and stark. At plus 100, it's brighter, it's yellower, it's greener, it's browner. That's something to think about when playing with vibrancy. This might not be necessarily needed to go 100% with it, but maybe a couple points up from where you're at in the original might just help bring some life to the image. Saturation, though, will increase or decrease color throughout the whole image evenly. So, perfect example, this landscape over here. We're not taking the brightest colors of the whole thing, we're taking all color, and we're jacking those up or bringing those down. Where these two go hand in hand is when you've edited and you've played with a bunch of the stuff in your vibrancy. Now as you go through then and start playing with your saturation, you're able to take these extremely bright parts that you might have just jacked up and cut it down a little bit. That might help then take that 100 plus 100 vibrancy. Maybe it'll bring the background down a little bit more so it looks a little bit more muddled. Maybe it'll take that yellow and green in the dog's fur that we're getting around the chops and the nose and the eyes and bring those down a little bit too. That's the kind of thing that they go hand in hand with. Definitely something to play with if you're shooting in color. It's not a terrible thing to play with even if you're shooting in black and white too. It might add some extra flair to those images. But again, it's up to you. One of the last things I edit on any of my photos is the sharpness. I think this is the last step you should be making in all of them. The sharpness is going to clear up your image and give you something that really shows definition and depth of field. But if too much is applied, you might get this weird halo effect where it kind of looks like a ghost is on your image. I think the frog one is perfect. From the left, that's the original untouched. From the right, that is now what it looks like with that little bit of sharpness. You really can see the fine details on the skin of the frog, where the shadows aren't as blocky, they're now more formed. Same thing with the highlights. The fox, it's a little less apparent, but the fox shows more of that haloing, if I'm honest with you, where it kind of is like, I think you turned it up too much on there, and now it just doesn't look 100% there. But sharpness is one of the last things I do. Now again, before I hit sharpness and I now edit and I fix that last part, I would go through my image. If that's the frog, I might go back through and look at contrast and exposure now. Maybe I'll play with that a little bit. Probably won't go back to cleaning and cropping. I've already done that. But I might change a few other aspects of this to make sure that it's perfect. And then I'll go through and do sharpness as the final kind of sending off tool of what I just did. That to me is the bare bones basic editing that you can do. Of course there are multitudes of more features. There's hundreds of features on some of these editors. It's up to you to think about what you want to do, how you want to use them. A lot of these tools allow you to use a lasso tool to go around one part of the image that you want to add the sharpness or this color or whatever it is. And that's why you see a lot of photo editors for hours sitting there. And they'll circle a car on their photo and they'll just work on the car by itself. They won't touch anything else. That's the beautiful part about this stuff, is that you can get really complicated with it, but you can also be very bare bones. I personally, this is how I edit every single time. I rarely use other features on my editing. Only reason being is that I think that 80% of what I did in the camera is perfect. And I think that this is the final touches to make things sharper, to make the colors stand out a little bit more, to bring more gloom or to bring more brightness to the photo. There's a whole bunch of different reasons for why. Now that you've done that, I harp on this one. I love photography, but I think something that people fall into is they just put it in the computer and then it goes to die. take pride in the work that you did. Print the images. These are the most typical print sizes that you can find on the market. You can get frames at Michael's, at Walgreens. They got them on Amazon for cheap, but be proud of your work. If it's your family vacation, put some pictures of you and the family around the house. You know, if you've got grandma and grandpa still around, they might love a picture of you and the missus or you and the kids. Something that'll be fun. If you don't want to go through the hassle of printing, digital picture frames exist. And there are so many brands out there. There's ones where you can insert the whole memory card. There's even ones where you can download an app on your phone and you can put as many photos, thousands, as much as you want, and it'll just keep circulating. You can set them up for other people, you can do it for yourself, but these are great ways to take pride in your work, where it's not just, you know, your profile picture, your phone and laptop wallpaper, your, you know, whatever. Enjoy your work, be proud of it. Let me talk a little bit about videography, and then I'll end with accessories. If you guys have questions, you can ask from there. But videography, when filming videos or content, your work's going to go through three main phases. That's pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production should be as simple as, what am I doing, where am I doing it, how am I going to do this? You're making notes, a skeletal outline. You're basically talking about how you want to execute the shot that you're about to do. If I'm going to film myself bouncing this ball, I might say, okay, well, if I set the camera up, you know, facing this direction, what kind of lighting do I want? What time of day are we doing this in? Where are we doing this? What kind of ball is the person using? Who's the person? It's things like that that really help to make sure you nail the whole thing and really sound out all the details. Because again, you might make it to the second step, production, then you forgot about 8 things. So if you can make notes, write stuff down, prep yourself with however that looks for you, that's the pre-production phase. Production phase is then the main phase. It's the part where you start to execute everything you said you were going to do. And then post-production, putting it all together, making the edits that we just talked about, cutting things down, filling up, you know, sound, music, whatever it is that you're doing, and then putting it all together for the final project. This could be a post for social media. This could be a family video that you're sending out. This could be something that you're doing for fun to document or to show travel. Who knows? But these are the 3 main steps within videography and the process you're going to go through. From there, then, there's a bunch of different aspects to keep in mind with filming. And the more advanced you get, the more I recommend researching and figuring it out. But for those that are just getting into it, just starting, I recommend caring about 3 things: video resolution, the ratio, and the frames per second. If you've bought a TV in the last how many years or months, you probably know a little bit about video resolution. Standard, HD, 4K, and 8K. All that means is that there are pixels in this TV that go from one corner to the other corner, that then go from one corner to the other corner. We take those numbers, we multiply them together, we divide it by the diagonal size, and we're able to then get to the number of pixels on the TV. Standard definition is 720, HD is 1080, 4K is 4000, 8K is 8000. Where does that matter? Well, right now, if you're at home, you're watching news, most people, if you don't have a cable or satellite connection, of standard. If then you do, you have HD, which is shooting in the 1080. Anytime you watch the news or you're doing something, it's all showing in HD. 4K is becoming more and more popular because of movies and cinema. If you go home and you want to watch Transformers, well, it's going to look a whole lot better on a 4K TV than it would on an HD TV. And same idea with 8K, even though that there is no content that currently exists for 8K, unless it's something that somebody shot and maybe put on YouTube or something like that. Film in the correct video resolution for not only just whatever you're trying to show this to, but for what your camera is. My camera can get all the way up to 8K on one of mine, but I have no reason to shoot in 8K, so I would really never use it. 4K to me is perfect. From there, then I can tone it down on the computer, make it HD. That makes the file easier to share, to transfer, and send. Again, whatever works best for you. Ratio is also in a similar boat. Now, what is a ratio? Again, if I relate it to TVs, for those of us who remember the days, there was widescreen and full screen. When you bought a DVD or a VHS tape, it literally is set on the package. It was widescreen It wasn't full screen. Ratios is that same thing. Depending on what you're shooting for, you might be more inclined to shoot with certain ratios. Now, if you take your camera out the box today, go to the video setting, you look at it, it should automatically be set for 4:3. 4:3 is the whole sensor. That means from one edge to one edge to one edge, it's going to be 4. 4 would be the longest way, so the vertical. Sorry, horizontal. And then 3 is going to be your vertical, your up and down. You go to green on this chart for people following on at home. It's the bottom right photo I'm looking at. You go to the green line, that's the 3 to 2. So now you're going to get those black spacers on your video as you're recording. And if you go to 16:9, you're going to get even bigger ones. And that's aspect ratio. Oppenheimer, the movie that came out, that's a good example of it. They would show flashback scenes where it was dramatic. It would be scenes during the trial of Oppenheimer, and they would then bring in the aspect ratio while the film was going. And that just was supposed to show the dramaticism of the events in the trial that he was going through. And then it would go back to the 4:3, and that would then show off just that this is what happened in the past, and this is a little less, crazy. 1:1 is the final one. I don't really talk too much about it, but that's for Instagram, social media. If you're going to shoot something for online content, 1:1 ratio is perfect because it gives you that pre-made box. Same box that you see on the phone, even though I think Instagram just announced that they changed their aspect ratios. I could be wrong, but now they allow for you to do bigger ones. Anyway, it gets a little muddy. Frames per second is the last kind of over-the-top technical, and then we'll get more fun accessories. Frames per second is this simple. When you take a video, you're not really just taking this long video of sorts. You're taking hundreds of thousands of photos of whatever it is. Those photos then get compiled on top of each other, and that's how we get a moving picture. One of the first videos is this horse that's running through a finish line. A lot of people have seen it. That was shot on, I think, 24 frames a second, and that is a literal 5-second clip. All it's showing is a horse running through the finish line, but they've labeled it out in galleries and in history. I think it's in the Smithsonian, where when you walk in, there's a clip of it playing, and then you can see each individual picture that shows the horse going from A to B. That is your frames per second. The more frames per second that you have, there's two things. Number one, the more smooth the video will look, but then two, better slow motion you can get. For slow motion as a whole, 120 frames or more, always recommended. For something that's more cinematography, or like something simpler or easier, for example, the news. The news uses 24 frames a second. There's no point for it to have any more. Most cable television shows at 24 frames a second because the average American TV or the average TV in general isn't necessarily a 4K, and in some cases not even an HD model. So there's no reason to go faster than 24 frames a second, because if they do, it might look muddled, or it might look kind of weird on the TV, it might not flow properly, it would give you some off-putting kind of visuals. Shoot the appropriate frames per second based on whatever you're doing, whatever content. For the most part, when I shoot, I'm either in HD or in 4K. I personally do 4K just so I future-proof myself with my work. I'm typically in a 4/3 aspect ratio, and I don't remember the last time I went over 60 frames a second. I'm typically shooting 24 frames. 60 if maybe, like I do a lot of volunteer work where I take videos and pictures of animals and dogs for shelters. These things move fast, so that's where I would maybe use 60, but they're not moving so fast, and I'm not doing slow motion with them that I need 120. Now, these are the must-haves on there. So that's the must-know of things for shooting video. Here's your must-haves. Camera, lighting, and audio. The only three things people care about. If you have a favorite YouTube person you watch, take a look at all that. Do they sound good? Do they look good with all the lights on them? And is their camera nice? If that all sits and says yes, that's part of the reason you're watching that content or you're watching those videos. When I was first getting this class set up and ready to go a few years ago, my guys who run our marketing and run our social media and video that we do told me these three things. They said, one can be bad, two have to be good. And if two are bad and one is good, no one's going to watch it. That has stuck with me since. So camera quality. Having a camera that shoots appropriately for the content you're trying to make does not have to be movie quality. I've got friends that make videos for online or for their social, for their brands and for what they're doing. One guy makes clothing that looks like it's from the 1980s. And the way that he does it is he has an old Sony Handycam that he uses to shoot it, but it works for his brand. Lighting, choosing a lighting method that works well for you, and audio quality, microphones. Again, I'll talk a little bit about it in a second here. Microphones can get really bad or really good. It all just kind of depends. This is the most extreme form of lighting, but I like to show this before I show the next ones, and I wanted to give it its own slide. This is an example of perfect studio lighting. And what a lot of people think is that you got to spend a lot of money for something like this. You can go something cheap, but also too, if you're home and you've got some lamps around, pull the lamps over and you can do the same exact thing. So the fill light is your main one. That hits the subject matter completely. That fill light, though, is going to cast a shadow. So you need these other two lights, like the key light and the backlight, to help remove the lighting from the shadow that's behind the subject, and to help remove the shadow that would be by the feet. There will still be some shadow, but this three-point method of lighting is what professional studios all start with. Before then they start to nitpick and say, okay, we need one more light there, one more light there, this light there. That's why when you walk into these studios, they've got thousands of lights everywhere because they need to be able to control that in order to help the background look so good. But if we can't be movie stars, can't have that, these are my next recommendations. On-camera flashes are great for photography if you need that extra light. Light bricks or light blocks, these LED pieces, these are my personal favorite. I love these things. I have two of them myself. I put them on cameras, I put them on light stands, I bring them with me when I go do photo shoots for people. They're enough light where I illuminate the subject, but they're also easy and small and compact and recharge. And also, COVID really sold us on these, but they're still being used today, ring lights. If you watch any content that was made within 2020 to 2021, you'll notice that people have lights in their eyes or ring lights that kind of show in their eye because of how intense these lights were. It would reflect back in the pupil. Those work too as well. If you can control them, even better. Microphones. If you buy a TV nowadays, you're going to notice the first thing, the sound sounds terrible. That's why they always tell you, get a sound bar, get a sound system. The way I look at it is the same way with cameras. They've made the TV technology so good, so perfect, that they're like, we can kind of push the sound quality out. You're going to get something else. Cameras thought the same thing. We're going to make the picture, the video, we're going to make all this really great. We're going to give you a tiny in-camera microphone that's going to sound bad. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. You're getting a trade-off with it, but that's why they make thousands of other accessories. You can get a shotgun microphone. I like these a lot. They're easy to capture sound that's in front of you. Just be aware it's going to capture radiating sound as well too. Wireless mics are my other favorite, and I own both of those, and I use them for different settings. But a wireless mic's great because it hooks up to your camera. You can then connect the microphone to somebody else, and you're just picking up their audio. Boom mics can kind of do something similar. That's where usually you got a third guy there. That's if you're doing something that you can't have microphones on the person. Shotgun microphone wouldn't do you too much good. That's where a boom mic would come in. You see a lot of those like sitcoms where they can't really do that. And then a lav mic. That's a wired mic. Usually it connects to something like this. You'd then have the transponder on the back side of you, run the cable up your shirt so no one could see it, and then have it where it's connected. You'll see newscasters wear that, talk show, reality stuff. They're going to have that type of technology. Stabilizing your shot. Again, we talked a little bit about this last week with some tripod and just kind of still photography, but there's three main types of tripods. You got monopods, pretty self-explanatory. You got a still head tripod or ball head joint. They call it a ball head because it twists and it spins, but it has three legs, tripod. And then you have a video tripod. Where a standard tripod and a video tripod differ is that typically there's an additional arm that comes off of your video tripod. You can then use that to pan, tilt, or rotate the camera in order to get the shot you want. It keeps it nice and smooth and compact so it doesn't look really shaky or blocky. Some of these video tripods too have wheels on the bottom, and those wheels make it really easy for you to follow and to track and to do that same type of thing. I had a buddy who does weddings, and because ballrooms and these kind of places usually have carpeting or smooth floor, he's got one that he retrofitted with wheels, so when he's recording, he can just kind of sidestep. The camera doesn't bobble or weave, but it's perfect for him to use as he's shooting the content. In that same boat though, some people like gimbals, they like stabilization. Single-handed gimbals work for that reason, two-handed gimbals exist, and I've only seen this monstrosity or contraption like 3 or 4 times. But this body gimbal suit, which I think looks so ridiculous, but it does work. Again, more stability. This is more of the run and gun. The tripod, the video tripod, is a great still feature. If you're staying in place in one area, you're not moving. But if you're gonna move, if you're gonna, walk around, getting a gimbal, while they're pricier and more expensive than tripods, really can help keep that steady and stable shot as you're moving through the different subjects. And I think that's all I got for you guys. So next Thursday is the 4th Thursday in the month because we have 5 in July, so there's no class next Thursday. The final Thursday of the month, which I believe is the 31st, that's going to be our Beyond the Traditional Camera. We're going to talk about drones, GoPros, action cameras. And then this whole class series will restart in August. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask. Anybody online, if you want to chat or chime in, let me know and I'll be here.
We bought the tripod you recommended.
Yeah. Good. It's been working, or have you tried it yet?
We don't have camera yet. It takes,
Oh,
We ordered it,
takes 3 months.
No, 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Which camera did you guys get?
the Sony Alpha 7.
Okay.
Mark
Okay.
IV.
Yeah.
It was sort of the right price point and
Yeah.
quality, so.
Yeah. It's a great camera. It's powerful. It's good. Sony's been making that for years now. They haven't announced the Mark V yet. Sony is one of those companies where if it's not broke, don't fix it. So for the most part, while they do have new cameras constantly coming out, there's certain favorites that they just won't touch, and the 4 is the same one. Yeah.
Why so we didn't buy it? It's like when you upload pictures, be faster, some adapters.
Oh, the adapter. So we did buy because Sony has a special memory card for RAW.
Sure.
And they told us that you can get this memory card reader.
Yeah.
But you can also do it from the camera directly,
Yeah.
right? It just takes longer.
You can. I mean, both are going to take roughly around the same. The transfer comes from the card. So the faster that card is, the faster it's going to write it on there. I don't like transferring with the camera. I've had horror stories, not with myself, but from others, where you could be sitting down after a long day and spill something, camera's shot now. And if it's in the middle of transferring the photos from there to there and it gets disrupted, you can lose your photos more easily from the camera to the computer connection versus from the card reader. I personally like the card reader for that exact reason, but again, everyone's a little bit different on how they do it. Either one works.
I mean, I have a card reader on my laptop for the regular cards, but
Yeah.
the RAW.
That's for the raw, for that big guy. Yeah, I know what you mean.
When you had the last class in the last,
Yeah.
does it make sense to bring a drone with us, or?
You don't have to bring anything with you. Really, the idea of the last class is going to be talking about, I consider like this to be tools in your tool belt, where it's like these cameras are helping you, get something out of it. The last cameras we'll talk about in that Beyond the Traditional Camera is meant to be like, okay, my camera can do this, but now here's a camera that can go underwater. Here's one that can fly. Here's ones that if I'm making videos for other people, I might be able to add those snips into it, make something really powerful.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind it. I'd say if you have a drone and you really want to learn how to fly, just bring it in, and we can always go in front of the store. I can show you some stuff.
There you go.
I'd say come in on any day that's not a Thursday where I'm doing the camera class. Come in any day other than Tuesday,
Oh, okay.
Wednesday. I would say we just go right to the front. I'll show you how to take off, and then I can show you basics on that.
That's cool, yeah. We got a little
It's
like
like Tuesday, right?
I'm off Tuesday, Wednesdays.
Oh,
Tuesday,
okay.
Wednesdays, I'm off.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday around, so.
Yeah, so Thursday's just tough because of the camera class.
Okay.
But any other day than that,
Monday,
by all
Friday.
means. Yeah, Monday would be great, Friday would be great. The weekends are hectic here, but even then, it's mainly people coming into the store, not outside.
Maybe Sundays. Yeah.
I have a few questions for you. So,
What you got?
you know where cameras have this camera stabilization?
Yes.
I have it on binoculars or something. So, is that doesn't take the place, at least kind of fudges for a tripod?
It can and it can't. So even with any of the yes and no. The stabilization's fantastic, especially when it comes to still photography.
And that's still not as good.
Yeah. Well, even for video, it does a good job, but for still, it really does help a lot. When you get to the video, there is still a little bit of that shakiness, and that's where then those gimbals and tripods are great. With shooting photos, the only reason I would want to have a tripod with me are like those images we looked of the mountains, where they were crisp and they were really developed and clean. I might bring a tripod with me, do long exposure, let the photo sit for 10 seconds to get all that information embedded into the photo.
But just for parties or family.
Everyday shooting, you're good. The new cameras with stabilization are fantastic.
And then the reason I was once upon a time, moved something which I forgot. But it seems to me when you do the histogram, so they made a big deal that if you put too much to one side
Yeah.
and to the other side, even if you try to edit, you lose some because you can't really.
No,
correct.
100%.
I mean, I don't know about that because I
Yeah.
understand. But if you're overexposed or underexposed, so much you can do.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I mean,
So the ideal one they said, try getting not too much.
yeah.
So there's only so much you can do.
There's only
Is that true? I don't know.
I would say no, because I mean, it depends. I'm gonna say yes and no. If you're shooting JPEG, I think that is true. If you're shooting RAW, I mean, what you have available to you on RAW, with playing and then going through and adjusting exposure and doing all that, it helps it a tremendous amount. Because you have more information to play with, and especially on these new cameras, the amount of information that they're acquiring while they're shooting, it's unbelievable what you can edit and change.
Sometimes like I could take a bird and be underexposed.
Mhm.
So bird will look kind of rushed out when I get these black spots.
Yeah,
So you know what I'm talking about.
I know, yeah.
So that would
Those,
be underexposed.
yeah, and
So
that could,
I can't fix it.
no, you probably won't be able to, especially not on that guy. Maybe something on the newer one, absolutely, but even then, it still depends on RAW, and it depends on a few other factors while you're shooting. Where your exposure was at the time of the photo would also be a big indication.
And last question. Oh, so when you're trying to, this goes way back, I can't remember what it was, but there was a couple of different ways of, if you have like a spot, and you want to take off the spot, a couple of ways to do it. I don't remember. One, you try to take part of it.
Yeah.
So,
That was that spot cleaning I talked about at the beginning.
yeah, but there was different ways of doing it.
There are a couple, I mean,
So, did you try to take like this spot? Did you try to take from one spot and put it over the other spot?
you can, so again,
Or what, there's another way of doing it. I think I'm-
there are a couple. The way that I do it, the way that I'm teaching it, is these newer, I mean, especially if you get any of these new softwares, they've all been updated within the last how many years. All they do is use AI technology. You sit there and you circle one area that has the perfect color, just like you're saying, so it could be like, here instead of here. If I circle that, then I go over to the other spot and touch it with my mouse, it'll then color match without making it look like I just painted over it, if that makes sense.
Now, this is I bought this more years than one of them. Is that the 850 at the time, you couldn't get it. So,
Yeah.
So, should I trade that in for one of the mirrorless cameras? Would that make a sense?
I would say absolutely, yeah. If
So
you-
what's the reason?
better
Just
for,
have more things on it than I
Yeah.
can even possibly.
better for low light, better photos in general, more megapixels, more information. It's faster.
How much megapixels? This thing's got like 40 something, 20,
Yeah.
go up to make
I-
a billboard. No.
I would say then the biggest thing that you're getting for trading it in and you're getting a lighter camera, you're getting newer technology.
You get that stabilization.
And you get the stabilization too. Yeah. There's a whole
But my lenses aren't touching, are they?
no, because you can get that adapter, and you can bring the old lenses
No,
over.
even if the lenses is not gonna make anything lighter, there's no lighter lens in there.
Well, I mean, some of the new mirrorless ones, yeah, they've made it a little bit lighter. They've changed the glass and the way that they layer those glasses and the coating on the inside. So they've done some big changes to help
Have you
make
noticed a difference?
I would say so, yeah, absolutely.
Then these are expensive ones.
Yeah, and that could be the other reason to keep them, and then just get that adapter and then bring them right over. Then you don't have to waste the money on the lenses.
And I got some times, some serious money.
Yeah.
So that's my big debate now.
I'd see what the trade-in would involve first and
Well, you don't
foremost.
get anything for these.
Yeah. It wouldn't hurt to see.
I mean, who's gonna buy it?
You'd be surprised. People still come after that stuff.
Really?
We do a whole trade-in downstairs with our service department. They tell you exactly how much the thing's worth.
Yeah, but heavy.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
And what I paid for that.
I mean, you're not going to get what you paid for it. No one
No,
ever
no,
does.
no,
It's like a car.
Paid. Price is not good.
Yeah, of course, because there's newer technology, everything. But it doesn't hurt, especially if it's just collecting dust. So,
Do you share your slides?
sorry?
Would you share your slides? Or?
I don't really have a way of sharing the slides because I mean they're more for like how I just described it.
Yeah.
But if you go to YouTube, go to the Apple Electronics page, all of these are live, so you can watch this exact same class over and over, save the video. It's all on there.
That's fair.
Yeah. And that way you can also take screenshots of it. I don't have a way of sharing it because it's something that was shared with me.
Yeah, I just knows it was a Google Docs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, it sounds.
Yeah. I know.
So, and then the other thing was, I can't remember much from the class, but it was a system where you go like here, then you get a wireless to take another picture,
Oh,
you scan over.
Yes.
So, is that a good way for anything? Or?
You could, yeah, absolutely. Again, it depends on your situation where you're at to do that. But there are it's a wireless flash trigger, where on top of the camera is a trigger unit,
Right.
and then would connect to a flash, and you can put that flash wherever you want. Yeah, you can run it that way too.
So those give you 100 pictures?
No, I mean, well, lighting's always going to help. So it's not necessarily better because people can take fantastic dark photos. It comes down to the more light you have, the more you can take light away from that. So the more overexposed an image is, the easier it is to underexpose it versus the flip-flop. It's harder to make an image lighter when it's so dark. So it depends on where you're shooting, what the environment is, what your lighting looks like. It's not a bad idea.
So if you're inside, it's probably better.
Probably, yeah, absolutely. It'd be better if you're inside, yeah.
Outside, 7 days.
No, don't make too much of a difference.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Let me open the door. If anybody has anything else, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Cool.
I can't remember
It
everything.
takes a
So
lot.
many years ago.
That's the beauty. That's my favorite part about live streaming the classes is that I don't have to remember everything. I can always go back. I've done this class so many times. I've shot so many things. That's why it all makes sense to me.
Well, I really appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, guys. Thanks for coming in.
And you'll probably see us one of the Mondays with a drone.
Yeah, please. No, by all means, come on in. Bring everything you need, and we'll go through it. I like the drones. They're fun to me. All the camera stuff's fun to me, but I love the drones.
I learned about YouTube right now. It'd be much better to learn from a pro like you. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll take care of you.
Thanks.
When you're ready. Anytime, guys.
Thank you.
I had a drone shot, but it's not focused. I wish it was.
All right. Doesn't look like anybody online has any questions for me, so I'm gonna wrap it up from there, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you as always. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for your help.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. I appreciate having everybody here online. My name is Saxon. I teach the camera classes here on Thursdays from 5:30 to 7. We do this every Thursday as long as we can. We have 4 classes every month. So remember, next week there is no class, so that is July 24th. There is no class on July 24th. Our next class will be July 30th.